Welcome back. This is Eric Magidson, and I hope this video finds you having a great day. Here we are. We're back. We're at Chapter 3, Measurable Organizational Value and the Business Case. So let's take a look real quick at our objectives for this video series. It's describing and developing a project's MOV. So what is the value? We'll talk more about that. Understand the purpose of the business case, prepare the case, distinguish between financial and scoring models. So how are we going to determine which project to take on? Because there's usually always alternatives to accomplishing any challenge that we have within a business. And what I mean by that is multiple vendors that offer solutions that we might implement, including the means for us to implement our own customizable solution within our organization. And then finally, understand how projects are selected. And throughout, of course, we'll talk about documentation. Now, as we go through this, let me start by saying, no matter the size of the project, we want to have a business case. Okay, so it may be one page, it may be 50 to 100 pages of business case defining what we're going to do. But let's start with the idea, what I feel is one of the key implements, which is measurable organizational value. Okay, so it measures the value or the success of the project. Okay, so in order to do that, of course, obviously it needs to be measurable. Now, most people think about tangible measurements. Those could be, changes in data, changes in historical data, a financial representation, etc. But remember, we can measure things like customer value, customer satisfaction, etc. So those are also measurable elements, okay? The project, of course, needs to provide some sort of value, even if that value is that we're required to do this to stay in regulatory compliance. You'll hear me say that. The value is we get to stay in business, or the value may be that we don't get, assessed a fine because we haven't met some requirement prior to a deadline. So be agreed upon, of course, be verifiable, and the one I want to add to this is be completely supported. Okay, so no matter the project, we need to have that internal support from the human assets all the way up from the top to the bottom, in order to make the project successful. And of course, there's value in that. So objectives, scope, we'll take a look at these, schedule, budget, quality. A couple things here. As we look at this, it needs to support the organizational's vision, mission, strategy, and I've added values, okay? Because I feel that's one thing that was missing. So if you would pause, read Amazon's vision, read Apple's mission, read Microsoft's business strategy. So this is, their strategy, where they're moving. Of course, we see this as they're moving to the cloud versus the internal server within an organization. And then finally, let's take a look at values. Okay, so I'll click through this till all of that disappears. And here comes Mark Zuckerberg's take on Facebook values. So their values are focus on impact, move fast, be bold, be open, build social value. Whether you are a user of Facebook or you decide not to use Facebook, doesn't matter. I really want you to, again, pause, look at these, see what Mark Zuckerberg has to say in regards to the values of the company. I think it is very important that if we're setting values, which we need to, nonprofits do this in the aspect of what is it they intend to achieve, within their organization, and how are they going to do that within the values of the organization. So this is not business value, this is values. And of course, we don't want to confuse this as we talk about the financial value of a project. Okay, so project alignment, well, we need to, of course, start at the top. It means we need to understand the organization's vision and mission and, again, values, so that we can align everything we do with those. Okay, so if there's challenges with the vision or the mission or where the company is going, it's going to be really hard to find an organizational strategy, because the strategy is not in the statements. The strategy is in the execution and the demonstration of the statements of our mission, of our vision of our values. Okay, so once we have those clear, everything should be driven from that. We get to the strategy, that's the action behind our words. And from there, each project that we take on, as we look at measurable value, should support, you see it going back up, should support the strategy that indeed supports the organizational vision, mission, and values. So just a quick slide on MOV. Those 4 key things that we look at: scope, schedule, budget, quality. Those are the pillars of MOV. We want to make sure that we look at each and every one for every project. Now, again, this may be a quick 10-minute discussion within the project team. It may be a couple day remote site gathering, if you will. So something to keep in mind. But we never want to shortcut any process within completing the business plan, and the MOV is key. Okay, so what is the scope? Well, here it is: determining and documenting a list of project goals, deliverables, features, functions, tasks, deadlines, ultimately costs. So as we look at that, you can see this is huge. And how do we keep scope creep from happening? We make sure we're including as much as possible. There's never really including everything that you think of, because the fact is, as you go through a project, people start getting creative. They start thinking outside the box. They start looking at what else and what additional value a project can add. So then as the project team, we have to go and say, okay, here's a variance. Do we want to implement it? Or is this something we want to just put aside until we do the deliverable? And then when we get in that maintenance mode, we'll look at it. So schedule time, of course, is important. We're all limited to 24 hours in a day. So consequently, we can't schedule 25 hours in a day. If our employees typically work only 8 hours a day, and we have them doing other work, because most employees are hired to do a job, and if we're employing them for 40 hours, they have a 40-hour week job, and we suddenly just added a project to them. So how can we take part of their job away so that they can successfully participate and perform well within the project? What are the tools, etc. Time, of course, is huge. Budget is huge. I've been in situations where we've actually started a project expecting a capital influx into the company so that we could continue the project, not get it, and have to put the project on hold. So we want to make sure our budget is close. We don't want to go over. My initial thing when I started project management was learned from my dad, who was in technology, and that was, if I thought it was going to take 40 hours, put 80 hours in there. Especially when I own my own consulting business, because that way, if we finished it in 80, great, that's what I told the client. If we finished it in 60, well, wonderful, we saved the client money. Budget is the same way. Time is money, and money is time. So pretty clear. Quality, of course, sometimes referred to as quality management plan, quality assurance. How are we going to assess that we are in fact getting the deliverables, the results that were in the scope throughout the project? We don't want to wait to the end to find out that we didn't deliver. So as we stage this project and create, different portions of the projects, into the project, we want to make sure that we're constantly doing quality assessment. And of course, all of this starts with the goal. And in the text, the goal example given was from John F. Kennedy in regards to, putting a man on the moon. So he said, I believe that the nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. Now, notice this goal is small enough, but it is detailed. It gives a time deadline. Before the decade is out. What are we going to do? Landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. And if you think about it, this was a humongous, gargantuan task back in 1961. And as we go through this, I'm going to continue to use this example as we look to support this and how this goal was reached. Okay, so a good goal statement, again, needs to have, you know, the nation should commit, right? So there's the value. We're committed, okay, itself to achieving the goal. So what we're saying is this is what we expect to achieve, complete, whatever the case may be. By the decade is out, that's the time. We'll break this down even more, okay? And I'll give you additional examples. As we develop the MOV, you know, we need to look at where this project is, where and how this project is going to implement and impact our company. So, you know, is it going to impact our customers? In this case, given what John F. Kennedy said, here's some stabs I took at this. The American public was the customer. They're the ones paying taxes. Okay, they want to see this project succeed, or maybe they didn't. Okay, NASA was a customer because the American public was giving funds to support NASA's project. Strategic, top-level management support, which they had. I gave an example here if you haven't seen this movie. It's a fun movie to watch, Hidden Figures, in regards to computing, you know, that was used to accomplish Project Mercury, which was the first step. So notice it was initiated in 58, completed in 63. Key part of what Kennedy was asking for, you know, the goal that Kennedy had set. Financial, you know, where that was impacting. Of course, you know, taxpayer money's going here. We're looking at exploration outside of the Earth, etc. Operational, you know, who, what, where, when, how, and why. How is it going to impact the operation of, say, NASA? How might it impact the American public? You know, social, bring the country together for a common goal. And the common goal was to reach that goal that had been set by the end of the decade. And if you notice, we were well on our way by 63 with Project Mercury, first man in space, you know, to orbit the Earth and then come back. Again, that's just that key step, right? So there was an accomplished sub-goal of the primary goal throughout that decade. Okay, so potential areas of project impact examples, so strategic, customer, financial, operational, social. Notice with social, you know, education, health, we could look at the example of, you know, public health care and the website that was put up. Again, do some research on that, you know, the U.S. healthcare website. Look at what the initial budget was and how far over budget they went, and they still weren't able to deliver by the timeline that was needed. Just insane. And of course, as a taxpayer, I'm looking at that going, you know, there's a project that a lot of my taxes are going to. So I'm not trying to be political on this. I'm trying to give you just a simple example that you can relate to, if that makes sense. So look at these, pause the video, make sure you read through them. Let's go ahead and continue. I think this is a great place for a pause. This is a great first video at 13 minutes. I will see you for the next part. Take care.